It's a Friday, obviously, and the struggle is real. I've started and stopped this video about 7 or 8 times. And invariably, somebody says, Steve, why don't you just edit out the mistake and move on? Because we notice you do edits elsewhere in the videos. There's something to me about starting a video with an edit. I think it's just setting the video up for failure. It might not be, but that's how I feel. So I've had trouble saying the upcoming sentence. It's been an eventful week at my place. See, how hard was that? Wildlife. I've got stuff in my yard that lives with me. So I've got all kinds of stuff on my property, including deer. Deer, for instance. And I got no problem with the deer. I don't want them running in front of my car on the freeway when I'm doing 75 miles an hour, but I don't mind having deer in my yard. Occasionally they wander up and they eat the plants. I don't care. They were here before I was. Okay? So the deer are fine. I've also seen coyotes. I've seen skunks. I've seen raccoons. All kinds of stuff, all manner of stuff, especially a lot of stuff pops up at night, wandering around a portion of my driveway where I've got a camera. And so I've got a feel-good story for you here, because I've also got a deck. I've got a deck. And I was out walking around the other day, a couple weeks ago, and I saw some activity, and I sensed something was happening right underneath this edge of a deck. So I wander around outside and I watch, and sure enough, there are birds flying in and out of this spot underneath the deck. So the deck is here, and underneath there's wood and posts and stuff, and there's a bird's nest in that space directly underneath the deck right there. And I'm watching, and it's robins. Robins. Now, robins are the most common bird in North America, I believe, or if not the most, one of the most. It's the state bird of Michigan, the robin. We're original that way. Take the most common bird out there and make it your state bird. So it's a robin's nest. It's a robin's nest. So I start paying attention to it, but I also try to stay away from it. I don't want to disturb them while they're doing their business. I like animals. And so I discovered, however, that I could get on the deck and look through the boards and see into the robin nest. So about once a day, I'd very, very discreetly go over, look through the slit in the deck, and sometimes I'd photograph what I saw. But then I would leave, and I'd purposely avoid that area because I want to let the robins do their thing, because they're going to do this for a couple weeks, and then there's going to be more robins. And I noticed there were a few eggs in the nest, bright blue eggs. Robin's egg blue is a color named after the eggs. And bright blue eggs, just a couple. It's 2 or 3, but just a couple. And the next day, there were more. And what? Do birds really lay eggs days apart like that? It seemed odd, but there were 7 eggs. 7 eggs in the nest. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. We're gonna have a lot of robins coming out of this nest. And so I did some research, and they say that, number one, robins' eggs will take 14 days to hatch. 14 days. So I got 2 weeks. So I would watch, and sure enough, you'd see these robins flying back and forth. And 14 days later, these eggs are going to hatch. So I start paying attention, and sure enough, one day I take a quick glance through the deck, and I see that some of them have hatched, and some of them are hatching. But that's 7 eggs. And I saw one website that actually said that robins sometimes will lay eggs in another robin's nest. And I did notice that about 3 feet down the deck was a second robin's nest, identical to the first. It's possible that this other robin built this nest, came time to lay the eggs, and laid the eggs over here. I don't know. But I don't believe necessarily that all 7 were laid by the same robin because they were laid so far apart. But I found conflicting evidence on the internet, if you can imagine that. So 14 days later, they start hatching. So I take some photographs. I'll put them on the screen as we talk, as they seem appropriate. And so they all hatch. And so you see the robins coming and going, taking care of their young, as they so often do. And we've actually had some very good weather the last few weeks here in Michigan. No rain. It's been not windy and warm. So I believe that's better for birds who are in a nest because quite often the parents have got to sit there and keep them warm. No need to do that. So I think the robins were just doing their thing. And so I was paying attention to the robins, and I would try to observe them as best I could without getting near them or disturbing them. And so one day I managed to get, there's a way for me to get around underneath the deck and look at it from this side through a window. And I got a photograph of what was happening in that nest with 7 babies in a nest built for 4 or 5. And it was getting crowded. It was getting mighty crowded. And so I was a little concerned because what happens now? There's not room to spread out and they can't build like an extra wing onto the nest. And so I'm now thinking to myself, okay, I'm curious to see what's going to happen now. So I was out one day and I was staying away from the deck because I thought, hey, mom and dad, I got enough to take care of with 7 kids. And as I come around, I look and tragedy. The nest is on the ground, upside down, and there's not a bird in sight. And this is about an hour or two after I saw the nest crowded with the 7 babies. So I go running over there, and I flip the nest over, and it's empty. Now remember, there were 7 babies just an hour or two ago. I saw them. And there's 1 baby on the ground. 1. And he's hunkered down, trying to remain still, but he's there and he appears to be healthy. So he fell a good distance, but they're very, very light, and apparently he didn't get hurt. So now the other 6 are gone. I don't know what happened to them. Some animal might have gotten to them. I don't know. There unfortunately are some cats that wander around in the neighborhood. A cat may have gotten them. I don't know. But there's the nest on the ground, 1 baby. And by the way, the mom, one of the parents, I don't know if it's the mom or the dad, is actually over here because there's a tree that I would see the robins fly to if they got disturbed and they come back. And so I ran to my garage, got an old pair of gloves, got a ladder, and ran back with the ladder. And I picked the baby up, put the baby in the nest, put the nest back up where it belonged, grabbed the ladder, and went home. He went back, got out of the way. And now, I'm sure we've all heard the stories they tell you, never touch a baby bird because the mother won't come back. A lot of times they tell kids that just they don't mess with birds' nests, okay? Parenting instincts in animals are quite strong. And so my thought was, obviously the parents could come and try to take care of the 1 baby that survived whatever happened to its 6 siblings. But chances are whatever got those 6 is coming back to get this one too. If it's a cat or a raccoon or whatever. I mean, it could be anything, So my thought was this is the best thing I can do to try to increase this survivor's odds of making it. And so I put the nest back and I skedaddled and I avoided that area for a day. Okay? And as time goes by, I am now curious. Did the baby make it? Did he make it? So the next day, I very, very quickly and quietly go out on the deck, look down through the crack, and boom, there he is. He's in the nest, and he's still alive. Now, what are the odds that he could survive more than 24 hours later if his parents weren't taking care of him? But I've not been back in that area. I've been avoiding it because I didn't want to disturb the birds doing their thing. And so I did some more research on this, and it says that they hatch after 14 days. 14 days after they hatch, they actually leave the nest. So I started doing the math on this, and I realized that he only had a few more days from when I did the research to when he'd be leaving the nest. And so I would go back every day or two and take a look, and sure enough, he's getting bigger, sitting up. Occasionally you hear me look around, and we saw the parents coming in, taking care of him. And so he made it. And the funny thing is that on day 12 and day 13, after he had hatched, could be a she, I understand that. After the bird had hatched, 12 and 13, If you walked near the nest, you could hear the bird singing, making the same sounds that a robin makes. Because when they're younger, they just cheep. But as they get older, they start making different kinds of birdsong noises. And I would actually hear those. I'm going, oh, okay, so he's making that noise. I mean, I assume that he's learning to talk, so to speak. And went out to the nest last night. He's not there. Just to be on the safe side, got out and walked all over the area and no sign of him. And about 20 feet or 30 feet from the deck is a growth of foliage that is so deep and so thick that he very well just simply made it over there. I understand that at 14 days they cannot fly. Okay, they're not going to be able to fly and migrate or whatever, although robins don't migrate in that sense. But he's not going to be able to fly fully. But it's something to develop in the next few weeks. But they do leave the nest and hop around and kind of fly, and the parents watch over them and take care of them during that phase also. So if I had to guess, he got out of the nest, kind of fluttered down to the ground, and then the parents herded him over to that foliage area where he'll be protected by that. And I just assure you right now, that property is overrun with robins. So it's not going to be a story where I'm going to be able to tell you, like, oh, by the way, I see that robin to this day. He comes back to thank me. He's going to blend in with all the others, I'm sure. But, it's an interesting story because there were 7 eggs. One of them survived. And I know that on some level it's a tragedy because 6 didn't make it. But then you ask yourself, well, what would happen if all of them did survive? So those 7 survive, and they each have 7 offspring, and and we'd have more than we do right now, and they're already the most common bird in North America, or near the top of the list, if not the most common. So that's my little feel-good story for you. That's what's been happening the last couple of weeks at my place. But we do have now at least one more robin. But I got to tell you that apparently that deck has been discovered by the robins because about 4 feet down the other direction, another nest with 4 babies in it. But the nests are designed for about 4 to 5. So we'll see how that goes. And if I think of it, I'll do an update later on down the road about that. But that's the story about the robin that managed to make it through an ordeal and appears to have survived. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.